Professor Shila Garg for a very long time. She's had a long, I have many pages here of her resume, which deserves much more time than I have, but hopefully we'll hear her story and get more insights into it. She's had a long career in academics at the College of Wooster, very close to here, obviously, rising from professor of physics all the way to chair of department to dean of faculty and provost. And currently she's emeritus professor of physics. Of course, she has done so many things in her career, has led initiatives in India, faculty hiring in Ifat University, which is in the Middle East. She's been a reviewer for multiple things at the National Science Foundation, mentor to countless students, and prolific author at peer-reviewed journals and in papers. She has had executive training at Harvard University. Her PhD is, stand by, wait for this, is from the University of Kent, not from Kent State University. So do not confuse the two, and we shall find out which one is better. I hope she will shed some light into that. And of course, I'm really excited about listening to her story, coming all the way from India as the topic of her presentation. Don't think she put it in her bio, but one of her biggest achievements has been to get your program director through college. So I think that was particularly difficult, but she was somehow able to do it. Thank you very much, Dr. Shila Garg.
Thank you, Asad, for that introduction. And thank you all for inviting me here. I must say I've given hundreds of presentations during my career, but this is the very first time that I'm going to talk about me and more about my academic journey. But it's going to be intertwined with my own life, of course. And as you can imagine, I grew up in India. So my journey starts in India and wound through England, where I did my graduate work and ended up in Wooster, Ohio. In between, I spent a year in Africa, in Sierra Leone. So 4 continents, if you really are particular to count. And in India, growing up, I put Chennai because that's the town that people know, but I actually grew up in a smaller town called Coimbatore, which you probably never heard of. But growing there was no career counseling, no career planning, advising, nothing. So the way it works is if you got good grades, you apply to medical school. That's the only path that, everybody go to medical school. That's it. But I just couldn't work with frogs in the lab. So that was a no deal for me. But I was good in math and science. So I kept thinking, what can I do? So I was in high school by this time. And I said, engineering. For guys, engineering was number 2 option in India, but women didn't do that. So I said, I'll break some glass ceilings. I'll go to engineering school. But there was a problem, a snag. My oldest brother was in the engineering school. And it was like hundreds of guys versus, I think they started admitting women the class before me. So there were 2 women students. And he said, I don't want you to be the 3rd woman and everybody giving you unwanted attention. So he said, if you want to go to engineering school, I'll quit. So no need to tell you that I didn't go to engineering school because I didn't want him to quit and my parents didn't want him to quit. So I said, okay, physics. That sounds like a reasonable thing. I didn't really know what it involved to become a physicist at that time. But I went to a college, a women's college, to study. Is this working? Where do I point? Over there? It's this one here, right?
We can control from the booth too.
Oh, okay. That's all right. So I went to a women's college and there were 13 of us in the physics major class, in my class. So, but it was a very exciting time to study physics. That was the time of Apollo missions. And of course, we didn't have a TV. We just heard the moon landing on the radio, but it was very exciting. And I was very impressed and inspired by the big science that's doable, and the American science, especially of doing something that if a country makes it a priority, how you can do something that seems unreachable for human beings. So that was my biggest boost to staying in physics and wanting to be a research scientist. I didn't want to go land on the moon or anything like that, but I wanted to make it possible. I liked the whole feast of, the calculations that went behind and all the precise engineering and everything else. And from there on, I ended up, I'm not sure. Okay, so this was is it working now? All right. So that was my high school picture with my two brothers. Nope, it's not working correctly. Maybe they can control it from there. It went too far. Maybe it takes a little delay, I'm not sure. Okay, this is my undergraduate physics class. That's the one I wanted. Okay. I'm not sure what's going on with the slides. Okay, all right, this is okay. I'll just jump to this. So, so from India, I ended up in England to do master's at University of Sussex. And this was purely accidental. I didn't know anything about English universities other than Oxford and Cambridge, of course. But I just said, oh, I like to go to Sussex. It's on the beach, it's on the ocean. Sounded like a good idea to go to a university. So I went there for master's and then ended up at Kent. And you'll see, and Asad was right, Kent has played a major role in my career, both Kents. So this is me in the lab. I worked with plastic crystals, a group that nobody hears about anymore. At Kent, of course, we all hear about liquid crystals. But at my doctoral dissertation, I worked with these crystals that I had to grow and then use X-rays to orient their axis and then zap them with lasers to study the spectrum and determine its physical properties. I was thrilled. I mean, I just loved playing with all these instruments, the expensive toys, and doing the discovery process. I mean, it was really, I said, this is what I want to do with my life. I had no chance to teach as a graduate student. Here, mostly graduate students have a teaching fellowship. I didn't have that, and it wasn't that common at that time. So I just did research. So I didn't know anything about teaching. So it wasn't even part of my, future thinking. And after my PhD, I ended up in Wooster, Ohio due to a personal reason. And I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years to two beautiful girls. And during that time, I taught some labs, physics labs at the College of Wooster as an adjunct professor. But I didn't have a full-time job and I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. I didn't have a career plan, nothing like that. But since I was in Wooster, I thought, the College of Wooster was right there. I said, it's a liberal arts institution. And I said, I don't know what a liberal arts institution does, because my education was all science oriented, math, physics, chemistry, some Shakespeare thrown in, but nothing really broad. So I said, okay, I will take some classes at the college. College allowed townspeople to attend one class every semester, audit a class. So I audited about 15, 16 classes in those years, from anything from philosophy to psychology to, you name it, every department. I think I took a class probably, and I was a convert by the end of it. I said, this is the way one ought to be educated, the broad education and lifelong learning. I really fell in love with the model of education there. And fortunately for me, in 1987, there was, I think the slide projector knows which slide I wanted. So there was a position open in the physics department, and I was the first woman ever to be hired, of course, into a physics department faculty. And this was a soft position, which means that the money was not certain, and it was a visiting position, and it might disappear at any point in time. It was not tenurable or permanent by any means. And here I was 10 years out of my graduate school and hadn't done much physics other than teaching intro lab now and then. So I really wasn't prepared, and I've never really taught a course in my life. So it was a big transition, but the college took the risk and hired me. somehow. And I stayed in that visiting position for 6, 7 years. And every year I had to go through a national search along with pure, recently minted PhDs that were coming out of grad school. And here I didn't have a research program because my research project was 10 years ago, and it really wasn't relevant anymore. So I really had to establish a research program because College of Wooster has a very impressive senior capstone program that every senior does year-long research with the faculty. So we need to be research active. They wanted the faculty to be research active, as well as you got to get grants because you're a scientist, you've got to set up a lab, and you had to have peer-reviewed publications. So that was a lot. There, it looks like it came back to life. So I had to find a new research area and something we call it a tabletop experimental model, which really means that I had to have something that undergraduate students can work on, not like particle and that pipeline going, and it's been really wonderful. And as chair of the department, I was able to get NSF grant to set up what is called REU site. Most of you may not have heard this. This is called Research Experience for Undergraduates. And it's usually done in big universities, and it's very difficult to do in a smaller college like Wooster, where we have just had 4 faculty members in the physics department. Because in big universities, you can have graduate students, postdoc, they all can work with undergraduates. What you do is you hire NSF pays for hiring undergraduates to work with you in the summer. We create a research community and teach them all kinds of skills, experimental skills, presentational skills, take them to conferences. But at Wooster, faculty had to do the work because we didn't have graduate students or postdocs. So I set up this model, and it was very successful, and it still is running today. And this was such a successful model that I was invited all over the country. Different colleges wanted to repeat what we were doing. I would, host workshops and teach people how to write successful grant proposals. I was also very active in the national scene of the undergraduate physics. I chaired the Physics and Astronomy Division of Council on Undergraduate Research, and I was on Committee on Education of American Physical Society and so on. Back on campus, I was on a lot of faculty leadership committees as well. And maybe I can go to the next one. And in 2002, I was appointed as the Dean of Faculty. And Dean of Faculty is sort of like a strange name to describe what that role involved. It was not just working with faculty, mentoring them, helping them with a course and everything, but it also involved curriculum and sharing educational policy and working with students on academic policies and so on. So there was a lot of variety of items. I think maybe the next slide. Oh, they're working on it. Okay. All right. It doesn't matter. It's just my picture as the Dean of Faculty. So, so I did that. That's a position that comes from the faculty. And so it's a 4-year term. As I was appointed and the announcement was made at the faculty meeting, my colleagues gave me a huge big flashlight. So I looked at it and said, what? I mean, they presented me, ceremoniously with this flashlight. So it was evidently to ward off the dark side, because I was going to the dark side of the administration. So that was sort of illuminating in a sense that there was mistrust always between the faculty and the administration. So it was a lot of political maneuvering, but I absolutely loved it. People said, Shila, you're very sensitive. You're probably not going to do well as a dean of faculty because you take all kinds of barbs from all over the place. People are unhappy with policy making, and you have to be the liaison between the faculty and administration. And I am sort of sensitive in nature, but I absolutely love being the dean. And because I said, okay, I'll do what I can do. I mean, I'll do my best. That's all I can do. So I would go talk to faculty, talk to administration, talk to different people. Only thing I didn't like was when parents would call and complain about something. Dealing with parents was difficult. But anyway, so that was part of the job as well. But I did, not sure how I'm doing for time, but I don't want to keep going, but I'll just highlight a couple of things I did as the Dean of Faculty. Each person, it's like a speaker of the house. That's a third position, president, vice president for academic affairs, and then the dean of faculty. So dean was like third in row. And anybody who went to that position, sometime it might be a humanities English professor, it might be somebody else from social sciences. And I was a scientist, of course. So I brought in my strengths. So each person brings their own perspective and their own strength. So what was my strength? Quantitative analysis, of course. And those were the days when admissions, course, registrar's office, all the different parts of the college didn't have one software system that was, comprehensive. Each department worked on a different software, and there was no way of talking to each other. So, for example, the faculty always wanted reduction in teaching load, that it was too much teaching. But in order to do that, you had to first of all understand what is the teaching load, and then I spent night after night after night crunching through literally data from the registrar's office of who taught what, how much courses, and then to agree, what does a lab mean versus what does a language lab mean versus what does an independent study mentoring mean? I mean, how do you count these things? It's not just a course. It's a lot of other things, internships, for example. So anyway, so I did a lot of those and finally standardized it with a lot of meeting, a lot of talking to people. So that was one thing I did and brought our office to the 21st century finally, because people were still using paper for everything. I put all the forms on the web page and, all that kind of a thing. I also really enjoyed being on the national dean's picture. I was in different organizations and I chaired the liberal arts dean's division of a organization. So I enjoyed doing all that, but there was a price to pay. I didn't have time to continue with my research. I was supposed to teach a course a year, which I did whenever I could, but it was really difficult to keep all the other things, responsibilities going and doing innovative things as well. I mean, it's not just, keeping the everything flowing smoothly, which was part of my priority, was to improve the structural organization of, I feel like if an organization is not structured correctly, it's not going to be efficient. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But the other thing was that, my research I had a student a year, but really I wasn't very active, honestly. That was a price that I paid. But on the other hand, I was passionate about globalizing the curriculum. I built a lot of international, maybe we can go to the next one. A lot of international collaborations with different universities. If the one, maybe the next one. So the one that I think I have a picture of is at Payap University in Thailand, where we had a Wooster in Thailand program. And we had a lot of those kinds of, I had a lot of faculty exchanges and faculty collaborations with international scientists. And, when a place like Wooster, a lot of our students do study abroad programs, but they're usually language majors or history majors or English majors. Science students don't usually have time to do because they have to do organic chemistry or whatever, physical chemistry, and they just can't miss a semester. So I encourage faculty to teach short courses on site so that science students can go in the summer months, perhaps, or winter months. So there was, for example, we had a global social entrepreneurship program in Bangalore, India, and a history professor taught a course on medieval history and plague in Siena, Tuscany. So exciting places to go, and tropical biology in Ecuador and performing arts in India. So there were a lot of wonderful courses that were developed. So globalizing the curriculum was one of my passions, but next one, please. But there was still a problem that there were not enough courses on India. With India and China being, this is in the 2002, 2006 range, those two countries, they were really, our students needed to know those countries. They were, taking a dominant position in the world. So I wanted our students to be exposed to a lot of Indian courses, but we didn't have much other than religious studies courses. So I took a group of 12 faculty members on a faculty travel study seminar to India for 2 weeks with the condition that they would come back and develop a course on India or at least a component in the existing courses. And that worked out beautifully. And in fact, the performing arts in India was a result of this particular, next one, please. So, and then the structural issue I mentioned, the VPA, the Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of Faculty, sat in every darn committee meeting that there was. I mean, we were in every committee meeting and we did the same thing. We would meet with all the faculty chairs. If they had a problem, they'll come to both of us. So there was a lot of overlap and redundancy. Plus the Dean of Faculty position, as I saw it, was just impossible position. Because it just had too many responsibilities. So you just had to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but you really couldn't do anything in a deeper way. So I proposed and our president agreed and board of trustees agreed. So we restructured the academic affairs into a more vertical and cleaner, so where there is a provost instead of the VPA, Vice President for Academic Affairs, which is a common model in academia, and then 2 deans, one dean doing all the faculty related stuff, the other dean doing the curriculum related stuff. And that structure, I actually served as the provost for the first year to put the structure in place and tweak it, and it's working quite well. So maybe the next one, please. And then I finished my term, 8 years in administration. I could have continued if I wanted to, but I just decided I did well. I was pleased with myself. And I said, okay, I want to go back to teaching and research. And of course, again, I needed to get back into research after being sort of not terribly active. And this is when I had a grant to work with Dr. Yackley, and two of my students, one worked with Jim Gleason and the other one with Dr. Yackley. And we spent the summer at the Liquid Crystal Institute. And like I said, Kent's been important to me all through my career. And when I finished teaching and well, during this time, I was sort of going towards my early retirement, and I took on a position as Senior Director of India Initiatives. So maybe the next slide would be great. And what that involved was, we had a lot of alumni in India, but like most schools, you didn't have a database. So we didn't know, we had their old parents' address and we don't know where they were. So we wanted to make sure that we gathered all our alumni and established a leadership team. So I did a lot of work towards that, as well as have the alumni help us with recruiting students to come to Worcester. And so I also had the pleasure of traveling to India twice a year, taking my president to the vice president for admissions and staff from the admissions office. So I made a lot of trips and we visited a lot of private schools and recruited students. So that was a really wonderful way to finish my career. And there's just one more slide. So I wanted to put this on because it's a Wooster Rotary. You might recall the 2003, we had the tsunami that wiped out parts of the coast in India, as well as Sri Lanka and so on, Thailand. So there was a fishing village that got completely wiped out near my hometown of Chennai. So the Worcester city and the Rotary helped to rebuild that fishing village, and it's called Worcester Nagar. Nagar means a town. And it's still there, and they have houses, and people are resuming their life. I mean, they've been doing this now for 18, 19 years. But every time a team from Worcester goes to India, we always visit them because we have such a connection. They even have a Galt library, whereas we have a Galt library in College of Wooster too. So it's like, oh, there's a Galt library here. So that's, a lot of the connection works. So I've been retired for a few years and been doing a lot of volunteer work in my community, of course, grandkids. And I've been able to read books that I've always wanted to read, have time to read. So thank you so much.
I think we have just a minute for a question or two, if there are.
Uh-oh. Thank you. First, I want to verify something you said earlier. I'm a engineering graduate. I went to a college of about 250 students. There were 2 women in that 250 student college. More importantly, though, I think as I listened to you, your early education went through the UK.
Yep.
And we've had a series of really fine programs. And it's interesting that at least one other, and I can think of 2 other people I know who have immigrated, and their journey has always gone through the UK. Is there a reason for that?
That's a good question. I was thinking about that actually. Like I said, I was so inspired by NASA and the Apollo mission. One would think I would have come to America. But because of the colonial history of India, there's natural connections with England. Families go back and forth and people there. My family had no connection in America. And my dad, ironically, worked for Her Majesty's Colonial Service. So, he had lived in England for many years. And at the time he didn't, but he said, apply to England. So I said, okay, England. So I picked a couple of universities and applied. So yeah, America seemed much farther away from India just because we didn't have any historical connections. And yeah, late 60s, early 70s, we just didn't know enough about it to apply. And I didn't have the courage to just jump on the plane and come here.
Sue.
Did your brothers stay in India or did they move on?
Actually, my engineering brother lives in Brunswick, not too far from me about. And I always tell him, I thank him. I said, you know, if you didn't interfere, I would have been, not that being an engineer is not a good thing, but I think I make a better physicist probably. So yeah, and the other brother is a doctor and he lived in India. Yes.
Amanda.
Did your daughters go into science or into a STEM field?
No, one went into business MBA and the other one's an environmental public policy. So it's a lot of science, but she ended up in the public policy arena.
Any other questions for our speaker? Oh, big O.
I'm curious, since you were in academics and in the teaching side and research, and then in administration, and also went back in a little bit of research. So you've really tasted both back and forth. And is there a clear winner?
Oh, that's a hard question. For me, number one, if I have to say what has been my best experience, it's working with students. So I have to say it's the teaching and research because of that. And, you know, the connections that I still have with all of you and seeing students' eyes light up when they understand something that you clear. So yeah, I think the teaching and research definitely is number one, but I like being an administrator, as strange as it might sound. A lot of people, a lot of my faculty colleagues would say, thank God you're done. Aren't you happy to be back in the faculty? I said, yeah, I'm happy to be back in the faculty, but I did enjoy my administrative years because I felt like I was cleaning up stuff, you know, feel like this is not efficient. This is, so I like organizing, you know, so I like being the organizer. So, but yeah, I like both of them. I'm glad I did the stint as administrator because I really felt like that was very rewarding for me.
Thank you. And we'll make that the last question. If there's other questions, would you stick around for a minute if other club
Sure,
members?
absolutely.
Okay. Well, Dr. Garg, thank you so much for coming with us today and telling us about your story. It's a tradition in our club here at the Rotary Club of Kent, Ohio, to have a responder to each speaker. And today that responder is Carol Creamy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Garg, thank you so very much for being with us today. I don't know if you're aware of this, but at the executive board meeting last week, OSID promised us that this would be the best meeting of the year. And you have not disappointed us. You have followed a long line of excellent speakers, but what you had to say was very, very valuable. In addition to that, we're really happy that you showed us a picture of OSID when he still had hair. We've been wondering for a long time what's holding all those brains in his head. So, but seriously, as a woman who grew up in an era when you did, when we were discouraged, if not precluded, from entering so many fields, science, engineering, math, medicine, I really appreciate the fact that you have brought, you know, so many of your students along with your unique insights that you've gained from the liberal arts. As we know today, all students, boys and girls, are really being highly encouraged to enter the STEM fields. But along with that, I sometimes wonder, are we channeling our young people into those fields so early in their lives that they develop tunnel vision? And I can tell from your presentation that you really hit that or discovered the intersection of the liberal arts and the sciences and hit that sweet spot and carried that knowledge to your students and to your university with passion and love. You have clearly loved what you've done and brought a great deal of love to it. So for all your contributions to the College of Wooster, to Kent State, to the city of Kent through OSID's company, and to our nation, to the nation of India and many nations beyond, we thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Couple last things I'll bring your attention to. I didn't mention before, we have our picture that we took a couple months ago up here. We're going to make that file available to everyone, not try to have a big sale. So if you're interested, you can take a look. We're going to get that file distributed to everybody. And if we could end our meeting today with our four-way test, which is behind me. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.